Otaku, king of the Phantom Beasts, is back with yet another Chimera video. Hey guys, Otaku here, back with another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. So today we are going to be taking a step forward in time and looking into the Infinite Forbidden format, and we are going to be talking about Fiendsmith Chimera. But before we do, I have noticed that a great deal of you are not currently subbed to this channel, and I am trying to break 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we're about 5 months away. So if you're not already and you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content, be sure to leave a subscribe here on the channel to continue to support the channel so I can continue to make more videos like this one. But also be sure to like and also comment below your thoughts on today's video. So if you're not already familiar, Fiendsmith is an archetype getting introduced in Infinite Forbidden, and needless to say, it's incredibly broken. So much so that almost every deck will be splashing a Fiendsmith engine once, the set releases. And what this engine can do is kind of dependent on what deck it's being played in, but for the most part, it can consistently set up a 3-stack Appaloosa without a normal summon. Or due to the fact that the main deck monster and the fusions are both level 6s, it can put up a High Wave King Caesar, a Beatrice, or some other rank 6 monster. So before we jump into how this will be included into Chimera, I think I want to give the chance to actually talk about what the combo line is kind of looking like for the Fiendsmith combo in general, because it kind of plays on its own until you get to the extra deck, and then that's when it kind of meshes into the actual deck depending on what you're playing with. But to start, you always really want to see Engraver first. The spell can also be live, but Engraver is kind of the go-to because it helps you get more bodies into the graveyard. So to start, we of course activate Engraver's effect to send himself to the graveyard to add the Fiendsmith spell, which is going to be Tractus. We'll activate Tractus, activate the Fabled Luri, discard the Fabled Luri, and use his effect to special summon himself since he was discarded, go into the Requiem, and then use Requiem's effect to summon another Engraver, and then use Engraver to put the Engraver back, or the Requiem back, and then we make the Sequentia to fuse into the Lacrimosa, and then Lacrimosa to summon out the Engraver that is still in the graveyard. From here, depending on what deck you are playing, can differ on what you're going into. Usually here you are going to go into a rank 6 by using the Lacrimosa and the Engraver, and then you will use that rank 6 to usually expedite plays. In Snake Eye, if they don't open any Snake Eye cards or they don't open a very good hand, what they will do is they will go into Beatrice, dump Snake Eye Ash, and then use Sequentia and Beatrice to make Promethean Princess, and Promethean Princess to revive the Snake Eye Ash, and sure enough, they have full Snake Eye combo without committing a normal summon. But also on top of that, Lacrimosa is usually the one you are detaching off of Beatrice, so Lacrimosa, when it's sent to the graveyard, also burns your opponent for 1200 damage, so essentially they have not only a 1-card combo that doesn't commit a normal summon that can make a 4-stack Appaloosa, a Beatrice, a High Wave King Caesar, but they also have an ability to burn you for time. So you can basically see how broken this is. All right, so now that we've gone over the Fiendsmith combo, let's go ahead and do a just quick test hand, kind of showing off the combos on how this plays so well with Chimera. So to start, we of course are going to go for the typical Fiendsmith combo, add Tractus, get the Luri, discard the Luri to summon itself back to go into the Requiem to summon the Engraver. Now it does, hold on, now it does tribute itself for cost. I got a little ahead of myself there, but tribute itself for cost to summon the Engraver, and then we're using Engraver Engrave to put Requiem back to summon himself. Now we are going to go into Sequentia, and we're going to use Sequentia's effect to fusion summon. Now, I do want to point out, I don't do it in this combo, but in a sense of a grind game, which there's a good chance you will. The Fiendsmith combo really makes it so that Chimera has an even better grind game than it already has. Because Sequentia shuffles materials back into the deck from the graveyard or the field, which makes it very powerful in the fact that the Fiendsmith cards can also put it back into the extra deck after you've already expended it. But Sequentia can make the fusion Baphomet because it just summons out a fusion fiend monster, not a light fusion fiend monster. In the materials, it just shuffles back materials. It doesn't have to shuffle back light fiend monsters. So again, I don't do it here. I end up summoning out the level 6 fusion, the Lacrimosa to summon out the Engraver from grave, and then I end up going into the High Wave King Caesar, and then I, from there, have already used my Fiendsmith combo. So now I have Caesar, so if my opponent is holding any sort of like Nibiru in their hand, because the thing about the Fiendsmith combo, you can't get to your rank 6s before Nibiru. So it forces your opponent to either use Nibiru early, or if they choose to hold it, they risk you just summoning Caesar and protecting yourself from Nibiru. So I go into Caesar here mainly because the Chimera deck already has an inherent way to get to Beatrice, so I don't have to turbo out Beatrice unless my hand is just really bad. So we end up going into Chimera combo from here going forward. We end up going for the Cornfield Coatl, add the Gazelle, and then we use Poly to fuse the Lachrymose, or not the Lachrymose, to fuse the Sequentia and the Gazelle to go into Chimera. We use Gazelle chain 1, Chimera chain 2, Gazelle add Nightmare Apprentice, Nightmare Apprentice inherent summon to summon itself, use its effect to add Sword Knight. So now that I've added the Sword Knight, before I make the Sword Knight, I ended up going into Beatrice because once I use Sword Knight's effect, I'm going to be summoning the Baphomet, which will lock me into fusion summoning for the rest of the turn. So I want to make sure I get the Beatrice out now. So we're going to use Sword Knight effect to go into the Baphomet, use Baphomet's effect to add the Chimera Fusion and the Gazelle back to my hand. And then use Beatrice's effect, detaching the Chimera because we do want him in the graveyard for our opponent's turn. So we detach the Chimera to then dump the Diabells. This is important because thanks to Chimera Fusion, once I fuse here, I can use the Baphomet's effect to revive the Diabells on my turn instead of my opponent's turn. So we will then go Chimera Fusion, fuse the Gazelle and the Baphomet. We have already used Gazelle's Fusion summon effect, but you know, sometimes your hand doesn't justify, or sometimes your hand just means that you have to use both Gazelles. So we end up fusing into the Fusion Baphomet. We go chain 1, Baphomet Engrave to target the Diabells, and then we go chain 2, Fusion Baphomet to dump a Tau the Enchanter, or the Tau the Chanter. So then we special summon the Diabells off of chain 1. Then we go Tau, target the Mirror Sword Knight to summon the Sword Knight. We do Sword Knight here because we do only have one card in hand. And as you're about to see, we will go Chimera Fusion, add it back to our hand, so that way we can fuse on our opponent's turn. The goal here is that I'm going to set the Chimera Fusion, and then on my opponent's turn, I'm going to use Sword Knight on their draw phase to summon out Baphomet, and then use Baphomet to add another Chimera Fusion. Unfortunately, as you can see here, we have both Gazelles in the grave, and I only run 2 Gazelles, but we will add Chimera Fusion. But the goal here is that we will use the Chimera Fusion that is set to kind of try and apply more pressure, because since I have this Ash Blossom, I could technically go into Garden Chimera and pop some stuff on my opponent's board. Could go into Magnum by getting rid of this Beatrice, because on my opponent's draw phase, this Beatrice will be expended. We will be dumping the Dark Barrier statue on my opponent's draw phase, so that way the Chimera in the graveyard can banish itself to summon the Dark Barrier statue. However, I choose not to do that until my opponent tries to commit a special summon, so I can make it kind of fizzle. But no, this deck has an incredible amount of just grind game at this point. Chimera was already really known for its grind game, but it's incredibly powerful now with the Fiendsmith cards, because the Fiendsmith cards kind of put back themselves into the deck or the extra deck, so that way they can summon themselves, but then also the Sequentia can put back materials for the Chimera cards as long as you're summoning out the Baphomet. But other than that, let's just jump on over to the deck list. All right, so keep in mind, this is still definitely a work in progress. However, this is typically, I think, what the Chimera Fiendsmith deck is going to look like, at least mine. So to start, of course, we will probably still be in a hand trap heavy format. However, the problem with the Fiendsmith engine is it's going to make it so decks like Snake Eye can play through all hand traps, essentially. They're going to be able to set up Caesar to counter Nibiru. They're going to be able to play through a bajillion things. The only difference is that Fiendsmith plays heavily into Droll, so we might start seeing Droll in the main deck again, which if that's the case, then this build will change a little bit, so that way I can put Droll and Crossout into the main deck. Droll's already in the main deck. However, we will be main decking Crossout Designator, because Crossout Designator murders Chimera even without the Fiendsmith cards. So we're running 3 Ash Blossom, 3 Ghost Mourner, 2 Droll and Lockbird, 3 Imperm, and then I'm running 2 Talents to try and counter out, or try to counter out the fact that I will be getting hand trapped at some point. We are running 1 Dark Barrier statue in the main because it's a fiend. As long as you have Poly or Chimera Fusion in your hand, there's no downside to drawing this. We then have the Big Wing Baphomet. This has always been a 2 of. Nothing has changed there. Same with the Cornfield Coatl. A lot of builds aren't running the Diabells going forward. I think that's fucking crazy, because Diabells is still forcing your opponent to set spells and traps. It counters evenly matched, so your opponent can't just evenly you. It counters Imperm if your opponent like draws into it, or they decide to hold it for your turn. They can't just imperm you on their turn to try and crack your board. It counters Droplet. It counters just so much stuff just by existing on the board. So I just think it's crazy not to be running this. This is just a free, like, quick play spell and traps counter, essentially. And then, of course, you get the pop. We are running 2 Edge Imp Chains. We are running the Patchwork engine, 1 Fabled Lurie for that Fiendsmith engine. It is just a free body, but also it's a fiend in, like, the weirdest scenarios you could use it as fusion material. Wouldn't recommend it because, unlike, you know, the Dark World fusion spell, it's not counted as a discard in this scenario. I am only running 1 Gazelle, as you saw in that test hand, essentially. 3 Gazelle does come up from time to time, but I just think that because we are only running the 1 Chimera, King of the Mythical Beasts, having the Beast is less necessary than having Fiends and Illusions. But if you choose to have 3 Gazelle, that's perfectly up to you. I just think the 2 is a comfort pick because Gazelle does conflict with the normal summon of Mirror Sword Knight. So you don't want to kind of draw into both of them and try and choose which one to summon because, of course, Imperm and Veiler and Mourner are still definitely a thing. Gazelle counters the Mourner because you have to normal summon him, technically, whereas Sword Knight can dodge like Imperm and Veiler, but what summons after cannot. We are running 1 Tau the Enchanter, or Tau the Chanter, I mean. It's just another way to get Diabells out of the graveyard on your opponent's turn. You dump this with Beatrice, or you fusion summon into Baphomet and dump this off of the Baphomet to summon Diabells. There's ways to get this back into the deck with like Sequentia, so that way you can kind of, again, have that grind game. 3 Mirror Sword Knight, this is your 1-card starter for the deck. Nightmare Apprentice, you can run this at 3. I think going forward, it's kind of a 2 of. You don't want to see this too often. That being said, this does play very well with Fabled Lurie. If you open like Nightmare Apprentice and Fabled Lurie, but you don't open Engraver or Tractus, you can use her to discard Lurie summon itself, and then you still have, like, for the most part, Fiendsmith combo. Not all of it, but some of it. So there are still plays to be had there. So, like, having 3 Nightmare Apprentice is not a bad thing, just, again, a personal pick. 3 of the Fiendsmith Engraver because... why not? This is like the best card in the deck, probably, most likely. 3 Chimera Fusion. I remember when Chimera first came out and we were running this as a 2 of, but now that we have just so much flexibility with the Baphomet Fusion, this is definitely a 3 of. And there's very rare scenarios where you won't be able to activate this, because for those who don't know, you have to have a Beast or a Fiend as material to even fuse with this. We have Fiends up the ass, and then we have like 2 Beasts, 3 Beasts if you want to count him. So we will always have material here. 3 Tractus, because there are scenarios where you don't open the Engraver. You still want to see this, so that way you can add like the Lurie. However, if you open a hand with Tractus and Lurie, that's, you know, not a bad thing. Opening Lurie is not the worst case scenario in this deck specifically. I think in decks like Snake Eye, it can be detrimental. To get the whole combo off, but in decks like this, like I said, we have Nightmare Apprentice and we have Tractus to discard it regardless. Patchwork, obviously, because we're running the Patchwork engine, we run 3 of it. 2 poly. This does a lot more than just, you know, fusing. Obviously, it protects our Chimera, our Guardian Chimera if it's in the graveyard, but also Magnum the Reliever can put it back to draw us a card. And then, like I said, we had 2 talents and the 3 imperm. Side deck, of course, will change based off of the event, but kind of like the go-to for me right now is the Archfiend Hyras and the Simmel Archfiends. Hyras can search the Archfiends when dumped to the graveyard off of Beatrice or off of the Baphomet Fusion, but also it's a fiend, so you can use it as fusion material, and this is just a floodgate that's really good against Snake Eyes and kind of Tempai in a sense. But again, it could change. I'm looking kind of at the Bestials, because the Bestials can banish the Fiendsmith cards, get the light fiends out of the graveyard. However, one of them, I believe, can shuffle back like the banished pile. I think it's Sequentia. Can shuffle back light fiends that are banished. So you kind of have to banish the light fiend that Engraver is going to put back, because I believe he does target. So no, he does not even target. So you have to banish it before he uses his effect, and then hope that they can't get another light fiend in the graveyard. So this is kind of an iffy. Ghost Ogre, because field spells are still becoming very heavily prevalent. Nibiru, the Cosmic Cyclone. Cross-out Designator is big in this deck. I side it. because not all, hands, or not all for matchups is this going to be amazing. But Cross the Designator, I do put in the side on the off chance that my opponent is playing Droll, which in the upcoming format, there's a good chance everyone's playing Droll. So Cross-Eyed Designator just kind of helps counter that because Droll slaughters this deck. As for the extra deck, we are running 2 of the Baphomet. He's just the most flexible. There's ways to get him back into the extra deck thanks to the Sequentia, so that way you can keep recycling him. Chimera the Illusion Beast, I've seen a lot of builds not running him going into Infinite Forbidden. I think that's crazy. He's still your OTK strategy. And if you have like Codal in the graveyard, he can't be targeted for at least once. I think it's crazy not to be running him. 1 Chimera, the King of the Phantom Beasts. We're already doing this. There's not a lot of builds running 2 of him even now, because you really only get the hand rip off once, and he is a lot more strict with his material requirement, needing a beast and a fiend, whereas the Baphomet just needs a beast, fiend, or illusion, 1 of each. And he needs 2 materials, so one and the other. We are running 2 Lacrimosa. I'm considering cutting this to 2 or cutting this to 1 because in this deck I don't foresee summoning the second one. However, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I am currently testing with 2. 1 Guardian Chimera. I don't foresee needing the second one. A lot of builds run 2 of this, even in the current format. I don't ever find the need to get out a second one. I'm either using it to break a board, make an untargetable monster, or just preventing my opponent from playing the game. Magnum Reliever, it's draw power, it's popping power, it's just overall a very powerful card and really easy to make. Beatrice, obviously, because we're running the Fiendsmith combo, but as you've seen in my past videos, I'm already running Beatrice in the current format. Beatrice is just a free card. It's a Foolish Burial for literally any card in the deck. Send it to the graveyard, which is very powerful, getting our Mirror Sword Knight or Codal into the graveyard if we have hands that we can't get both of them into the grave at times. Or we can use it to get the Diabells onto the board, the Nightmare Apprentice onto the board, or just even getting a Light Fiend in the graveyard now with the Fiendsmith combo. So there's a lot of things you can be doing with Beatrice. High Wave King Caesar, it's just counter Nibiru, but also like just completely stops Pearly and stuff in their tracks. You can use this against Snake Eye Ash. There's a lot of things you can use with this. You just got to be careful of talents, because if they go talents, they can use this against you. So you got to be very wary of that. Requiem, obviously, and Sequentia, obviously, these are one-ofs. You can get them back into the extra deck. You don't need to have more copies of these, because you can only summon Requiem once a turn anyways. And Sequential, like I said, you can get it back into the extra deck if you're in some sort of grind game. SP Little Knight, because SP Little Knight. Appaloosa, there are just times that, you don't need to make the Caesar. Maybe your opponent's not running Nibiru, or they're not on Nibiru, or you're just more scared of other hand traps. Then Appaloosa's kind of your gal, but most likely if you're going Fiendsmith combo to get to Appaloosa, they probably already hand trapped you getting to her. But Appaloosa, just still a very powerful card. And then Chaos Angel, because we can still make Chaos Angel. Nightmare Apprentice and Mirror Sword Knight alone make a dark and a light. However, the level 6 Light Fiend monster plus the level 4 Dark Barrier statue can also technically make it. I don't know why you would want to make it, but Chaos Angel is a dark, so we are still able to make it under the barrier statue. But if there's some weird scenarios where you're just like, normal summon barrier statue, make Chaos Angel, and banish a card, and then you just have this big towers, go for it. Like I said, this is still kind of like a work in progress. This is something I've been toying with for the last few weeks, messing around with ratios, messing around with just other cards, and this is kind of something that I'm very comfortable with. Still learning the combos, of course, because thanks to the Fiendsmith cards, there are just 1,000 different routes to take. You don't always have to go into Appaloosa. You don't always have to go into Caesar. You don't always have to go into Beatrice. There's just 1,000 different routes you can take with this deck, thanks to the fact that Chimera loves fiends. But let me know what you all think down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like on this video, and also if you're not already and you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell button for future notifications of when I upload videos. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video. See ya!